Hey everybody, today I'm going to do a video covering one of my favorite Native American folklore, the Skinwalker. The roots of the Skinwalker are linked to Navajo culture and to the people of the Navajo tribe. They're known as Yi-Naud-Lushi, which translates to "with it, he goes on all fours." They're believed to be witches that gain their power through a black mass sort of ritual, so not the type of magic you'd want to mess with. Today I have two stories of Skinwalker encounters to read to you, but I'm going to start this off, however, with a submission that repeats what a Navajo trail guide said he knows about the mysterious and terrifying Skinwalkers. He said that at one point in time, they used to be good, and they would use their powers for good, to look out for the tribe. But as time went on, they began to bewitch people out of jealousy and greed, and apparently they would make people and their families fall ill with sickness. He was asked if Skinwalkers could be hired to hurt another person, and according to him, they can. But finding them is much like finding a drug dealer, very secretive and mostly through word of mouth. He told of a fellow Navajo that had actually seen a transformation take place, much to their horror, when peering through the window of a hut. The other Navajo had described seeing two Skinwalkers putting on coyote skins and zipping them closed with zippers. The skins then shrank to fit their bodies tightly, thus completing their transformation. And I'm not at all sure of the level of truth to these claims, but I think it adds a nice twist to the folklore. And now, without further ado, two allegedly true Skinwalker encounters, just for you. This is 100% true, so this will probably be a boring account compared to some of the other posts here, but I wanted to share this memory somewhere and maybe get opinions on the matter. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. My mom would often take us camping in the summers. This particular camping trip was somewhere in the vicinity of Shiprock, New Mexico. My mother took my older brother Chris, 10, and myself, female, 8, camping often in those days, and preferred dispersed camping on BLM and NPS land to camping in managed grounds. So she'd usually find us a spot and make herself busy setting up the tents and pit while Chris and I would scamper around and explore the area and be generally unhelpful little shits. On this particular trip, we arrived in the middle of the day, and as Mom started setting up camp, Chris and I started to explore the area around our campsite. We wandered into the woods around our campsite. Being in the desert, it was really just stunted trees and sagebrush, so I hesitate to describe it as a forest. But the trees and brush were taller than me and provided a decent screen. I wandered down into a gully and came face to face with what I later described to my mother as a wolf kangaroo. It was crouched low, with long, slender arms reaching down onto the ground, and large pointed ears like a deer. The fur covering its body was sandy brown and patchy as if it had mange. It had large orange-gold eyes and a snout like a wolf or a coyote. It bared its teeth at me and stood up. At its full height, it was the biggest animal I'd ever seen, towering over us and the sagebrush. I had never been, and probably still have never been, as frightened as I was then. Chris and I started screaming for Mom to come to our rescue. Chris regained his senses before me, taking off running back up the embankment to the campsite. The wolf kangaroo turned and sort of, I don't know, speed skated away from us through the brush and scree. Its legs were backwards like a dog's, and its strides took it far away and fast. Faster than any deer or antelope I'd ever seen. After a split second of staring after it in horror, I followed my brother up the embankment, screaming bloody murder for my mom. We were so frightened that my mom packed us back into the car and moved camps, conceding for once to stay in a managed campground. Chris and I were too scared to sleep in our own tent that night, and clung to Mom at the smallest twig snapping in the brush. So that's my story. It's boring compared to some of the others here, but it's 100% true, and I wanted to share. I vividly remember the way this animal moved as it glided away from us into the desert, and the sheer and utter horror I felt looking into its face. Chris and I have never managed to find an explanation for what we saw that day in the brush. I'm half Navajo and half Mexican. For over 20 years of my life, I lived on the Navajo Nation reservation in New Mexico. My Native American side of my family always warned us to be careful at night. My grandparents would always tell me stories of these shape-shifting witches who can curse you, kill you, or mess with you. They called them Skinwalkers because they would take the skin of dead animals and wear them to change into that animal or something in between a human and an animal, not a werewolf. I never believed in it really. I'm only half Navajo and light-skinned, so I was never treated the same by most people, so I drifted away from the culture and thought it wasn't for me. So it was around summer, and this happened when I was in high school, so about 6 to possibly 8 years ago. I would have been like 15 to 17 then. I used to hang out with a group of guys who liked to do a lot of delinquent type stuff. You know, smoke cigs, stay up all night, all the guys playing video games at somebody's house. Then at 3 a.m., if we felt like it, we'd go sneak out to Paradise. I know, it's an ironic name. It's basically a giant metal pipe that carries irrigation water to all the farms. But really it was also a spot for kids to drink or get high in the evenings. However, the place did have a scary history of kids and adults who drowned or died in the night. But I always thought those were urban legends also. But at 3 a.m., that was our time. We as boys would test one another to cross the pipe, sort of like an initiation, see how far you could go. We usually could go all the way across. Now keep in mind that pipe goes well over 3 stories high, and it's also wide. I'd say as wide as an average car. We would walk this thing for kicks in a group of 9 at 3 a.m. So one night, me and a small group of friends were driving around bored at 2 a.m., wanting to spook each other. So I said, let's go to Paradise and walk the pipe. As to most of these friends I was hanging out with, had never done that like I had. They agreed, pumped up on energy drinks, and we drove. It was pretty quiet. The sky was dark and the night was cold. The boys with me were Michael, Cordy, Tommy, and Therrell. And Therrell was the driver because he had the car and his family was pretty well off too, so he never had to worry about cash. We got to the place and he didn't want to go. Said his parents were traditional and he just wanted to chill in the car. Basically, he wanted to text some chick, I'm sure, without us bugging him. I told him it's fine, just keep the car locked and running in case we see something scary. Me and the other boys went on without him. As we got onto the pipe, a few of the guys were scared and had me take the lead. As we'd crawl, I say about 1/4 of the way across the pipe, talking and laughing, I notice a faint white or light gray bat, bigger than my head, flying around us. It dived for us a few times and we dodged it, but then Tommy slipped because of his Converse and almost fell off of the pipe. I reached out to him, grabbing his right arm. Michael had grabbed my shirt collar, and then Cordy grabbed him. All together, we got back on the pipe, shaken that we'd almost lost Tommy, into the dark depths below. The bat was gone. We were all freaking out, but the guys wanted to continue. We laughed about it as guys usually do. We got past the half point on the pipe with no problems, but as we got to about 3/4 of the way, Michael saw something. You see, at the end of the pipe, there is a hill, and behind that hill is very brightly lit because of a church somewhere off in the distance. Anyway, on that hill was a black figure with pointy ears, a dog silhouette. Now, Michael was a tough guy. He yelled at the thing saying, "I'm not scared of you effing Skinwalker," and tossed a few rocks he had in his pocket. One rock hit the pipe and the others fell into the brush below. That shadow silhouette dog stood up on 2 legs like a person. We all freaked out and our jaws dropped. Then Cordy said, "Look, another one's to the left," and Tommy said there was another one on the right. So 3 silhouettes of pointy dog-eared people on the hill. I told them to back up so we can get back to the car. The things to the right and left started to move down the hill towards us, so there's just the one standing on the hill, the one that first stood up. Now we're trying to go back, but we still have 3/4 of the way under us, and it's complete darkness. It was quiet for a few minutes, then we heard a girl crying, and it sounded like she was hurt and scared, almost like she was in pain. We were overcome with a strange feeling of wanting to help. Michael wanted to go back towards the end and crawl down and help this girl, and I almost followed him. But inside I was like, no, this is wrong, something isn't right. So I yelled at him and everyone, saying, "Are you stupid? Look at that thing up there on the hill. Did you not see those things? It's a trap. Screw that fake crying. If the girl is hurt, we'll come back when the sun's up in 2 hours and check. 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. is sunrise." Now the moment I said this, the crying stopped. All the guys freaked out, saying they can't believe what came over them. They said they'd almost forgotten what they had seen before. Halfway on the pipe now, and we hear a native drum being played like a powwow. We start running down the pipe, about 1/3 of the way to the car. Corey stops us. We can all hear under our feet what sounds like a pack of snarling, growling, yelping coyotes, but it's pitch dark below. But we know they are under us, so we run full speed, not looking back, to the car, and yell drive and haul ass on that dirt road back to a well-lit gas station, explain what had happened to Therrell. We couldn't get the girls crying out of our head, and we went back in the daylight just to make sure. We didn't find a girl. Instead, in the area where we heard the crying, we saw a coyote watching us a little bit of a distance away. It was not shy. It just looked at us for 4 seconds and then walked into a bush. I didn't go back there after that. Hey everyone, if you liked the video, feel free to subscribe and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching.